So February 22nd, Rome, the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, they wrote a church document, right? And a document which is called a Responsum ad dubium. So the doubt, dubium is doubt, was referring to if homosexual unions can be blessed, right? Regarding the blessing of the unions of persons of the same sex. So it was released as dubium, and the Church of Germany responded to that with this kind of a service of love. Love wins. What's the name of it? Love wins. All right. So it's very important to read the text. Actually, it's important to read the text. But what I want to mention first of all, the Church of Germany has responded to the responsum ad dubium, right? The response to the doubt of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith. They released this document regarding the blessings of people in a union of same sex, right? In the same sex union, in homosexual union. So the Vatican, interestingly, released this document February 22nd, and then the German bishops responded this with an event of, I think it was in 500, either 500 dioceses or 500 parishes, where they just had this blessing. It's called Love Wins, essentially. So I'm going to go over briefly the document. You can read it. It's brief. You should read it as a Catholic. It's important to, right, be up on these documents, be informed, and also what's going on in Germany. So first of all, I want to talk about a little bit of the sacraments, right? The sacraments, as we know, manifest the goodness of creation, of matter in particular, of what's physical, of what's tangible. Unlike the Protestant view, the traditional Protestant view, which sees matter as totally corrupted by original sin, and therefore cannot be, by any means, a medium of grace. There's no way. So through Catholicism, in Catholicism, matter is good, and it could be a means of grace, right? And in fact, they are in the sacraments. So matter, what is physical, tangible, becomes a means of grace in Catholicism. And this is because nature is still good, even though it's corrupted by original sin, which was a cosmic event. It wasn't destroyed totally by sin. It still retains its essential, its natural goodness, though it's wounded, we can say, right? We can still do natural good acts that become meritorious in grace, but we can do natural good acts. That's why the man who follows his conscience when he's inculpably ignorant can be saved, which is, right, we say that theoretically, but in practice, could that happen? Theoretically, yes. So only Catholicism can we have a theology of the sacraments, right? Sacraments are sensible signs that not only symbolize grace, but cause grace. So it's interesting. We have to get this mentality that all matter, everything we do physically, is a symbol of a spiritual reality. So, for example, eating, even the sexual act, everything I do with my body symbolizes the real reality, if you will, the ultimate reality, which is spiritual. So eating was created by God for the sake of the Eucharist, in order to spiritually go. The sexual union for the sake of spiritual union. So everything physical, right, we should be able to surpass that, transcend that, to see with the eyes of faith. So that's really important. So sacraments not only symbolize, but they realize spiritual realities, namely grace, right? They physically produce grace, according to Thomas Aquinas. So that's important. They are true causes of grace, God being the first cause and the efficient cause, and the sacraments being the instrumental cause. So they actually physically produce grace, which is nothing else of the sharing of God's life, right? God comes down and dwells in our hearts, the Blessed Trinity. So it is irreverent to, quote unquote, waste a sacrament. So, for example, that's why the church investigates if someone was baptized legitimately before coming into the church. So if a certain Protestant sect, right, certain denomination has legitimate baptism, right, the church will investigate that if you were to convert, in order to not baptize that person again, not waste the sacraments. That makes sense. We don't want to, what they say, confection. I don't know if that's the English word, confeccionar in Spanish. We don't want to realize, we don't want to make do the sacrament if it's already done. Is in a sense we're wasting the sacrament. So, for example, if someone's unconscious, right, the priest would give absolution sub conditione, or baptism even sub conditione, under the condition that they haven't received it. So this is a very reverence. This shows reverence for the sacraments. We're not wasting sacraments. The church is investigating, right? There has to be, certain necessary conditions for the sacrament to work and to be done in a reverent manner. So that's really important. So I'm going to read part of this responsum, which is important. I'll let you know when I'm reading it. Again, read the whole document. It's called Responsum ad dubium of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith to a dubium regarding the blessing of the unions of persons of the same sex. So it's 22nd of February 2021. Listen to this, very logical, based on tradition. Again, it's kind of in its language, it's kind of catering a little bit. It's, that's normal what we see today, but all right, so quote, in order to conform with the nature of sacramentals, a blessing is a sacramental, not a sacrament. The sacramental, it relies more on the subjective disposition of the person. It doesn't automatically, by its very work, realize grace like a sacrament does. So it doesn't have this objective power, if you will. So sacramental, just think of it as a lesser sacrament in a sense. You could read up on it in the catechism, right? Very also means of grace, but they depend more on the subjective disposition. Like an exorcism is a sacramental. So we're talking about blessings here. A blessing is a sacramental. Holy water, sacramental. These are also means of grace, but not in the same way as sacraments are. Quote, in order to conform with the nature of sacramentals, when a blessing is invoked on particular human relationships, in addition to the right intention of those who participate, you have to have right intention, that's key, it is necessary that what is blessed be objectively and positively ordered to receive and express grace according to designs of God inscribed in creation and fully revealed by Christ the Lord. Therefore, only those realities which are in themselves ordered to serve those ends are congruent with the essence of the blessing imparted by the church. So a priest cannot bless something that is objectively disordered, like the homosexual union, right? It is just, and we're going to talk about that. Quote again. For this reason, it is not licit to impart a blessing on relationships or partnerships, even stable, that involve sexual activity outside of marriage. So it's interesting how the Vatican words this. They word it in a general sense, which also refers to adultery, fornication, for example, as is the case of the unions between persons of the same sex. Right? You cannot bless any type of sexual union or persons living in a union that's sexual outside of marriage. You cannot, because it's disordered. Remember, sex is made for marriage. It has a natural end. We're going to talk a little about this also. The presence in such relationships of positive elements, right? They put this soft language in there, which are in themselves to be valued and appreciated, right? A little bit of concession, right? Give and take. Cannot justify these relationships and render them legitimate objects of an ecclesial blessing. Okay, very good. Since the positive elements exist within the context of a union not ordered to the Creator's plan, the very first command of God, create and multiply. Right? We have there's a Jewish friend of the family who was kind of upset one day. My father asked him, "What's going on? Why the long face?" And he says, "I haven't fulfilled the primordial commandment." Right? He wasn't married. And my father said, "What commandment is that?" He said, "Increase and multiply." Interesting. So it's the first commandment there in Genesis. Increase and multiply. Furthermore, since blessings on persons are in relationship with the sacraments, the blessing of homosexual unions cannot be considered licit, which means cannot be considered unsinful, right? Yeah, it cannot be considered licit. We cannot do that, right? It would be sinful to do that. Licitude, sinfulness, right? Or it talks of sin and not the unsinfulness, if you will. Validity is something else. This is because they would constitute a certain imitation or analog of the nuptial blessing invoked on a man and woman united in the sacrament of matrimony. While in fact there are absolutely no grounds for considering homosexual unions to be in any way similar or even remotely analogous to God's plan for marriage and family. Very interesting. Now, again, it's important to differentiate, which the church does, between the tendency, which is not sinful, is a disorder, and the acts, right? That's why some people differentiate between homosexuality, which is a tendency, and the gay lifestyle, which are given, right? A life given to those tendencies. The sin. The tendency is not the sin. The tendency calls us to fights, calls us to fight against it. Now, the origins of homosexuality is controversial. I'm not going to get into that, though it does seem to be psychological, but I'm not going to get into that. Either way, we do have certain tendencies, right? We do have certain tendencies, some worse than others. So we're called to fight them. You know, I remember it was Father Karapi who said he was talking to a group of homosexual men, and he said, this is very interesting. He said, I have something very, very much in common with you. And they were looking at each other like, what's going on? And he said, we are called to celibacy. Interesting, right? Very difficult. Let's pray for pray for these people. And this is the charity. This is true charity. This charity has to be rooted in truth. Charity cannot be hedonistic. Today, the charity love is totally hedonistic. Right, and that's why, and that's the basis of what the German bishops respond to this, right? And they believe that love conquers all, right? So they, with these epithets of, love wins, love is love. So they had this, let me see what it was here. They had this, it was a ceremony. It was a ceremony essentially called Love Wins, where they blessed homosexual unions. So in total disregard and open rebellion to the moral teachings of the church, the perennial moral teachings of the church. So it's very important. There's a neo-rationalist spirit. I follow my own magisterium. I pick and choose what I want to believe in instead of giving religious assent, which what I owe to the church in its moral teachings, its perennial moral teachings. Now, there's some teachings that are not definite, right? There's some, there's still some opinions allowed, though the traditional opinions are always the best. But in regards of homosexuality, it is clear in scripture and in tradition interpreted by our holy magisterium. So this is, I'm really glad that the CDF held the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith. They held up the teachings of the church, and let's pray for the church in Germany, because in the praxis they are in schism. I mean, not officially, but they are on the road to schism, and they openly did this to go directly against the Responsum. So I just want to talk briefly about marriage. That today, I remember I was giving a class, and I asked my students, why should we get married? And they really didn't even know why. So that's what we're seeing, a decline in marriage, right? There's no reason of, why we should get married, right? And if marriage is not seen as an objective institution, as something that is real, right? Then really we can just, it really is whatever I want it to be. It has no goal. It loses its very meaning and purpose, right? That's why relativists, right, the denial of objective truth, they don't realize that they don't realize, because, well, in their superficiality, they don't realize that that nihilism is a logical consequence. That if there is no objective truth, if there's no real institution of marriage, then really marriage in reality is a nothing. It's nothingness, right? You have nihilism. So Nietzsche, right, the philosopher who calls his self-proclaimed nihilist, tries to overcome nihilism with his will to power, right? The Superman or Overman, right? The will must impose itself and purge humanity from all its weaknesses. So the only goal is power, and that's what we're seeing today in politicians. Power. All right, so let me go to talking about a little bit about homosexuality, which I have here. And I talked briefly about this in another conference. I do bring this up in my college classes, and it's just strictly, right, very reason based. So, okay, due to our proper anatomical, anthropological, physiological, and psychological constitution, man and woman are mutually attracted in these aspects, and it is precisely from this attraction that children are generated. Right? It's a natural occurrence. There's a natural complementarity between men and women. Nature is telling us something when you see man and woman. You see woman, you see she's made for man, and vice versa. Man is made for women. Right? There's a complementarity even in the sexual organs. Right? This is not something that is conventional. This is not a religious prejudice. This is an ordinance and a determination of nature. Right? This is not a fruit of cultural stipulation. This is the way things are. This is what people want to deny. And later in another talk, we'll be in another video, I'll talk about how reality is kind of seen as something I need to conform. The fact that I need to conform to something is seen as a type of slavery, an impediment to my liberty. We'll talk about that in another video. The philosophers that, in the idealist German philosophers that start off with that idea. So it is clear that the principal objective of the sexual act is the propagation of the species. Is obviously what a sex for, what a sex do, right? The fruit of the sexual union between the opposite sexes is the procreation, is producing other people. For man to feel constantly motivated to propagate his species, there exists an elevated physical pleasure in sex. Also, nature is telling us something with natural pleasures, right? I have a pleasure sleeping. I need sleep. I have a pleasure eating. I need to eat. So nature's kind of giving me this little push, like you need to do these things with the pleasure, right? So there's a pleasure in that. Without this intense pleasure, the survival of man is threatened, right? We need this pleasure. Therefore, the principal goal, the principal end or goal of the sexual act isn't the pleasure, right? The pleasure is the means to push us. Is the means to push us. Is rather the expansion of humanity, because that's the end. That's his natural end. So again, not that you necessarily have to, within marriage, have to have sex always to procreate, though that would be the most perfect, actually. No, we're not talking about perfection. We're talking about in the realm of morality, what's sinful, not sinful, what's permissible, and what's good to an even lesser degree. You can have sex as long as it's open to life for mere pleasure within marriage, right? You could have that. But you're not disassociating it from its natural end. You see what I'm saying? You're not totally marginalizing or eliminating its natural end, like using contraception. So the homosexual act is intrinsically against procreation. It's against, right, the generation of another being. Therefore, it's immoral. You're totally breaking the sexual act from its natural end. Sorry here. Just like a disordered diet can be auto-destructive, on the sexual level, there exist disorders contrary to nature. So to say this is an act of charity is very important. It is an act of charity to say this. We say this because we love. Love is rooted in truth. Now, it is also very true that the way we say things is important, right? We have to say things with charity, right? As St. Francis de Sales says, we attract more flies with honey, or bees, with honey than with vinegar. That is true. But nevertheless, our sugar coating shouldn't jeopardize the truth. right? We should, sometimes we don't need to sugarcoat. Sometimes we need to be blunt, direct, and harsh. But most of the times, kindness, the way we say things, but we still have to say it. So this is charity. Charity is rooted in truth. Auto-destructive, and there's many studies done on this. Not to mention the suicide rate in the LGBT community. That's high. That is very high. And some people say it's because of the non-acceptance, but that's not true, because now there's a growing acceptance, but the suicide rate is not going down anymore. And not to mention all those videos that are censored of people who regret their transition, their mutilations, right? There's quite a few of those. I don't even know if you can find them anymore. Hopefully this video will probably be taken down. I'm going to post it on Facebook. We'll see what happens. It does seem evident that homosexuality is autodestructive emotionally and physically. There's what's the name of that? Is he Greek? No, he's English. Homosexual doesn't come to my mind now. The conservative will come to my mind later. He left the gay lifestyle. He left the gay lifestyle. Oh, his name is so easy to remember. Well, actually, it's not, but okay, it'll come to me. Can this be caused from it being a disorder, right? The the emotional and the physical, right? The effects of it. Anal sex is very dangerous, even among heterosexual groups. Very dangerous, right? Very not hygienic at all, and huge transmission of AIDS within that, with anal sex. Suffering a tendency that's contrary to the finality by which sex was designed. So if we use something that is not for its goal. For example, if I take a screwdriver and I use it as a hammer, I'm going to destroy the screwdriver. If I use a car and use it for something besides driving, I could jeopardize the car. Same thing with us. Same thing with the sexual act. With everything. If the sexual act is not used for its natural end, then it will destroy us, those who use it in a disordered way. The goal of homosexual sex is pure pleasure, since procreation is impossible, and then it opens the door to all these perversions. And why not? Why not? If you're not looking for the higher goal, this goal that transcends the pleasure, which should be the means to procreation, why not be open to perversion? It's mathematical. The homosexual act has no roots in the past and no projection toward the future. It seems to be no more than an unhygienic pastime. There's a study also that the homosexual lifestyle, the gay lifestyle, is essentially promiscuous. It's not. There's no fidelity there. What's the point? What's the point of being faithful in a way, right? If the goal is mere pleasure, the maximum pleasure, then therefore I do anything to maximize that pleasure, including having more partners. So there's a study that shows that there's a survey done, and I can bring it. It's a Spanish survey they did, and between each homosexual pair had like 50 to 75 partners, or I think it was 50 to 100 partners, but it was over 50 partners. So you see the promiscuity element. Some doctors see the complexity of homosexualism as a certain neurotic sentimentalism. As I said in another video, that it seems like homosexuality is rooted in an immature affectivity, right? You're not affectionately mature. And this happens a lot, that some people become homosexual and then they get out of it, like people who go, in the seminary, and then they get out, they become normal, or they go to a clear example is jail. They go to jail, they're married, they go to jail, live the gay lifestyle, or just have the strong tendencies, and then they get out. So that could be a sign of immaturity, right? Especially in the affections. The homosexual lifestyle is gravely unhealthy, and there's plenty of studies done on that. So there's a Spanish doctor. A lot of this book, I got this from a book written in Spanish, very interesting. There's a doctor called Miguel Nunez, and he wrote that homosexuality is abnormal, and even the child, in a sense, could see that a man is not made for a man. that simply observing the male composition, we can infer that no sexual organ that is a receptor, that he has no sexual organ that is a receptor, right? He only has one that penetrates. And that the woman has a receptor, right? So that the man is made for a woman and woman is made for the man. Homosexuality is a conduct that is objectively autodestructive. I say that anal sex is dangerous sexual practice, even with heterosexual, right? HIV, huge cause for HIV. We can all die of lung cancer, of course, but he who doesn't smoke has a lot lesser chance than he who smokes. Okay, I'm not sure why I put that here, but hopefully you get the connection. The homosexual population of the United States is almost 2%. Yet more than 80% of HIV victims are homosexuals. You see that? And I know of homosexuals who have died of AIDS. 20% of homosexual men have HIV. That's impressive stats. Impressive in the sense that incredible, not impressive in a positive connotation. Promiscuity, with exception, of course, is common among homosexuals. So again, why do we say these things? Hard truths in order to change minds, in order for people to change their ways and come to Christ, right? To come to Christ, to live the vocation, the natural vocation that we're called to, which is to be with a woman. And it is a supernatural vocation, which is to consecrate ourselves and live totally for God. So we should kind of live this virginity, this interior virginity, where only God is in my heart. Right? Only God is in my heart. And through that, live either the natural vocation or the supernatural vocation, whichever God wills for us. All right? And I ended here. Hopefully I wasn't too long. And God bless you all. Please do not forget to subscribe. All right? Take care. God bless.